This happened just last year. My friend Lucas is very involved and well connected in the music scene. By music scene, I specifically mean the dance and electronic music world along the East Coast, mainly in New Jersey and New York. It's honestly pretty impressive what he and his crew have managed to achieve in only 2 years. Here's the basic idea. Their company hosts what they refer to as events at top-tier venues. These are usually the most popular clubs or party spaces in whichever city they're in. Then they bring in the talent, which is often a very popular or borderline famous DJ. I'm not really involved in that world, so I'm not exactly sure who they've had perform, but I can say there have been some big names in the mix. Anyway, enough background. Lucas and I have known each other forever. I mean, over 20 years. He's basically been in my life from the start, and he's been my best friend for most of it. Because of that, he always lets me and a bunch of our hometown friends into his events for free and lets us hang out in the VIP area with the performers. It's honestly really cool and something I don't thank him for nearly enough. Lucas had a major event planned for the July 4th weekend at the Jersey Shore. It was supposed to be their biggest event yet, and all our mutual friends were going. Lucas asked me to come down early with him, and of course, I said yes. He, Henry, and I made the 90-minute drive and arrived at the venue about 4 hours before the doors opened. Henry and I didn't have much to do while Lucas and his team got everything ready, so we decided to start drinking a little early. Lucas and his crew had access to unlimited drinks, courtesy of the venue, and Henry and I definitely took full advantage. By the time the first DJ went on, Henry and I were more than just buzzed, to put it lightly. Since it was 4th of July weekend, we felt like our reckless behavior was justified. A few hours later, we were completely drunk. I honestly can't think of another time since then when I've been that intoxicated. Not even close. Don't get me wrong, Henry and I are adults. We can hold our liquor. We weren't stumbling around or throwing up. The real issue was just having less impulse control and making worse decisions. But regardless, we were having a great time, at least from what I remember. The night was winding down, and we were reaching that moment where you either found a way home or someone to go home with, or both. Lucas had an Airbnb nearby and promised Henry and me each a bed, so getting home wasn't a problem. The other part, though, was on my mind. Henry and I made our way to the bar and started chatting with a couple of girls we thought were attractive. Pretty soon we had figured out who we'd be spending the night with. We're not exactly models, but both of us are over 6 feet tall. For whatever reason, most guys around the Jersey Shore seem to be shorter than average, so our height gave us an even bigger edge. And for some reason, that seems to be what girls at the Jersey Shore care about most. Not looks, not body, not personality, just height. Don't ask me why. I still don't understand how girls from Jersey think. I might be messing up their names, but I'm pretty sure the girls introduced themselves as Sophia and Emma. Meeting them is right around the time things started to blur for me. So parts of the story after this might be a little unclear. As far as I can remember, it was actually Emma who suggested we all leave and keep the party going somewhere else, which Henry and I were totally down for. Sophia handed us each a drink and told us to catch up with them, even though we had probably already drunk more than her body weight in alcohol. I know it's unusual for girls to get drinks for guys, and it was, but these girls clearly had money judging by how they were dressed. After we finished the drinks, the 4 of us headed toward the venue's exit. As soon as we got outside, Emma suggested we go to her place, which was nearby and right on the beach. That actually caught me off guard. I had been expecting to go back to our Airbnb since guys are usually the ones hosting in situations like this. But both girls insisted Emma's beach house was way better than any Airbnb we had, and she probably wasn't wrong. So I didn't argue, and neither did Henry. We walked down the beach and talked the entire time. The girls seemed really sharp and interesting based on what we talked about. I remember thinking how nice it was to talk about something besides nightlife and the usual party stuff, not just with girls, but drunk people in general. At some point, I actually felt a little embarrassed for how drunk I was because I didn't think I could speak clearly and probably looked stupid. That's when I noticed I was actually getting more drunk than I was just 15 minutes before. But it wasn't the kind of drunk I was used to. It felt like my body was sinking under its own weight, like I could fall over at any moment. My legs felt weak, almost like cardboard, if that makes any sense. It got harder to move my limbs, my mouth, even my eyes, and at one point my hands and feet started to feel a little numb. Then, just as fast as that feeling came, it went away and I was back to my usual level of drunkenness, at least for the moment. Right then, we arrived at the beach house. It was incredible. I'm probably exaggerating because I was drunk, but it looked like something a pro athlete would own. We walked inside, took off our shoes, and ended up in what I think was the living room. I say think because I'd never seen anything that fancy before. It was decorated, but still minimal, even though those two things don't usually go together. There were actual sculptures on pedestals, but somehow it didn't feel cluttered or flashy. Everything on display just seemed to blend into the room like it was meant to be there. I wish I had thought to take a picture, but I was too out of it. Apparently Henry was too, because less than 15 minutes after we got there, he and Emma had vanished somewhere in the house, which left me alone with Sophia. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's the last moment I remember. Not the kiss itself, just her leaning in. That's where the night cuts off. I don't remember feeling dizzy again or having another drink or doing anything at all. But there's a long gap in my memory that covers several hours, and nothing I do can bring it back. The thing is, I know I didn't pass out because there are texts on my phone from that time that prove I was still awake. There's actual digital proof I was conscious, but I can't recall a second of it. And before you say I just blacked out from drinking, this felt different. I almost never black out. And when I do, I can still remember little pieces of the night, just enough to piece things together. And keep in mind, during those other times, I had way more to drink than I did that night. That's another reason why a typical blackout doesn't seem like the right answer. Plus, Henry had the exact same experience at almost the exact same time, which is too specific to be a coincidence. The next thing I remember is waking up in a bush with the sun high in the sky, more than an hour away from where the event had taken place. I didn't realize that right away because my phone wasn't in my pocket. Actually, nothing was in my pockets. My keys and wallet were both gone. But it gets worse. The clothes I was wearing weren't even mine, and they didn't belong to Henry either. They were someone else's entirely. The only thing I still had on me that belonged to me was my shoes, and even those were in bad shape. Both shoes were soaking wet and missing their laces. My head was pounding and everything felt disoriented, almost like I was waking up from anesthesia. I didn't even try to sit up right away. Instead, I stared at the sky for a bit, trying to understand where I was. Bushes, unfamiliar clothes, no phone, no wallet, no keys. Judging from the condition of my shoes, it seemed like I had been in the water recently, but there was no scent of salt water or chlorine on me. The most terrifying part was the emptiness in my memory. I truly couldn't recall anything after Sophia left. Like I mentioned before, that's when the fear began to creep in. I wasn't just hungover, I was genuinely scared. I had no clue how I ended up there. What if I had been in a fight or wrecked a car? What if someone had drugged me? I had zero memory of the past 10 hours. When I stood up, I realized there were no recognizable landmarks around. It didn't resemble any beach town I'd seen before, which made it more unsettling. The road ahead curved into more forest, but directly across the street, maybe a couple 100 feet away, was a 7-Eleven. It was literally the only thing visible, so I walked straight to it. I asked the man behind the counter if I could borrow his phone, explaining that mine had been stolen. He looked at me for a moment, probably trying to decide if I was telling the truth. Then he slid the phone over to me. The first number I remembered was my sister's. Other than my parents, hers was the only one I still knew by heart, and there was absolutely no way I was calling my parents. My sister answered right away, and I did my best to explain the situation. She ended up giving me Henry's number, which I called multiple times with no luck. That's when I started to worry that Henry had gone through the same thing, drugged, robbed, and dumped in some random bushes far from the venue. I was just about to contact the police when, unbelievably, Henry walked into the same 7-Eleven. We just stared at each other for a moment before greeting each other with a quick handshake. He then explained his side of things, and unsurprisingly, it was nearly identical to mine. That confirmed everything for us. We called the police and made sure to thank the 7-Eleven worker repeatedly. A few minutes later, we were outside the store telling our story to the officers. To their credit, they initially took us seriously, but as we gave more details, their tone began to shift. Were we certain we hadn't just had too much to drink? Maybe we had wandered off and passed out. They didn't accuse us outright, but it became clear they were doubtful a crime had occurred. I pointed out how unlikely it was that we drunkenly wandered to a town over an hour away on foot. That comment didn't seem to go over well with them. I gave them my sister's number and asked if they could contact her. She was already tracking my phone using Find My iPhone. To everyone's surprise, my phone was pinging from the middle of a parking lot a few minutes away. The officers agreed to drive us over, and sure enough, both our phones were lying on the pavement, side by side. Even though it was a relief to get my phone back, it only strengthened the police's theory that we were just drunk. They claimed we probably hadn't been robbed at all, that we had lost our wallets just like we had lost our phones. We tried urging the officers to check out the house Emma brought us to, the one she said was hers, but they refused. They insisted we had probably just been too drunk to remember accurately. One officer even said, "Happens more than you'd think." Then they handed us their cards and told us to get in touch if anything else came to mind. It was honestly baffling how unwilling they were to even refer us to other officers who might take our case. They told us to find a ride home since our phones had charge and simply drove off. After they left, I looked through my phone for the first time, and things only got stranger. There were a bunch of texts sent from me to various people I knew. Lucas, my parents, co-workers, and even some girls I had been chatting with. They were all normal-sounding messages. Stuff I might have actually said if I had a calm, uneventful night. They really did sound like me. But looking at them together, none of the messages lined up. One text to Lucas thanked him and said we had crashed at a friend's place. Another told my dad we were safe and found a couch to sleep on. Yet another to a girl just said I was home thinking about her. None of it matched up. They actually contradicted each other. I saw a bunch of missed calls and messages from Lucas, so I called him back. He sounded incredibly relieved, saying he had thought Henry and I were dead. He told us to stay where we were and that he'd come pick us up. While we waited, Henry and I canceled all our cards, but oddly, none had been used. Even though those girls likely had them for several hours, there were no charges. On the drive home, we talked non-stop about what might have happened. None of it added up. Yeah, we'd been drugged. That much was obvious. But that alone didn't explain it all. I've never heard of any drug that causes a blackout like that while you're still up and texting. Most of what I read said those substances just make you fall asleep, but I was clearly still functioning based on the text. And if it was just for theft, why go to all that trouble and not even try to use our credit cards? We approached them too. It wasn't like we were targeted in advance, and doing it in a home, whether theirs or not, was seriously risky. Lucas guessed we were picked out, but again, we had approached them. That idea didn't make sense either. Then there's the part where we both woke up in a different town wearing someone else's clothes. As insane as it sounds, Henry and I even checked ourselves for surgical scars, wondering if our organs were taken. But there was nothing. Lucas floated the idea that maybe we were given some rare kind of drug. That could explain the blackouts, sure, but someone still had to drive us out there. And someone had to change our clothes. We never figured out the answer, but we didn't just let it go. Henry and I drove all the way back to the shore to find that house. We tried to retrace our steps as best we could, thinking if we walked the boardwalk, we'd spot it again. Eventually we did. We walked up to the door and rang the bell. An older man answered and asked what we needed. I did the talking, keeping things vague to avoid giving too much away. I asked if a girl named Emma lived there or if he had a daughter or granddaughter our age. He gave a firm no. I made up a story that a girl had lied about owning the place, which he actually found amusing. And that was it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't leave that place with a sick feeling in my gut. It wasn't exactly fear, more like a deep discomfort, like something terrible had happened to us and we'd never figure it out. For a long time after, I was sure those girls were mixed up in something much bigger than we could imagine, that maybe they were planning to kidnap or kill us and backed out for some unknown reason. I doubt I'll ever have a real update, but if anything else happens, I'll be sure to share it.